Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? So full disclosure, this is going to be a very, very, very low tech talk. So the last time I spoke in Istanbul, I was introducing our latest snark scheme that my team came up with. It was called PMONK. And the contrast to this is there is zero math in this one. I just wanted to give everybody like a high-level notion of what are our trade-offs if you were to ever design a protocol that need to be compliant. So, ignore all the bits because I had no clue what the audience would be like, right? I assumed it to be like a generic audience. I wasn't thinking, having listened to a couple of talks before, I could see that I could have put in a lot more stuff in there versus random shit. Oh. Yeah, fine. Like, ignore all the bases. I just wanted to explain something in terms of how much things have moved on. If you go back like 2 years ago, so I've been working on building a protocol for the last 3+ years, privacy preserving protocol. Sorry, not privacy preserving, like, how could I say, a protocol that provides you with privacy while maintaining compliance and having selective disclosure or elective disclosure, whichever way you call it. So if you were to look at things a couple of years ago, everybody used to think about things in different layers. And, things have moved on. Essentially what I mean to say is like the places where you expected privacy to be, I don't think privacy is in the same place as it was before. It's kind of thought of as part of the infrastructure. So in my instance, it's like I am actually, as in my protocol, it exists in the smart contract layer, right? You can actually have your privacy in any of the layers you want. You can have it in a L1 layer, you can have it in a L2, you can have it in your smart contract layer. The real challenge in my mind that has come about is this requirement that has been forced on us. Okay, let me have this show of hands. Is there anyone in the room who is designing privacy preserving protocols for DeFi? Like protocols that provide privacy. Anybody from Railgun, anybody from Scroll, anybody from, oh wow, there's nobody. Interesting, okay. So yeah. So I'm one of those guys who do that. So we have a problem, okay? This is the definition of privacy. Essentially what this means is like, you as a human, you have a right to decide what you want to reveal to other people, right? It's a standard thing in the West. If you are from the West, you assume democracy works. Democracy can only work if and only if mathematically proven, right? Your privacy exists. You have to have the right to actually have a private vote. And if that doesn't exist, you don't have privacy, right? So unfortunately for us, that's not true in the world of DeFi, right? The nearest construct that you could actually see closest to what we know in DeFi, what we want in DeFi is dark pool. And there's been there in the traditional finance world for a while. So you could probably seen this book and probably seen the movie, right? Has anyone seen the movie or the book? No? Wow, okay. So apparently Michael Lewis is a very interesting guy. I'm assuming everybody knows SBF, right? Show of hands. Who doesn't know SBF? Yeah. Okay, fine, good. Okay, at least I'm just checking. I'm confused now. So Michael Lewis, his most latest book was about SBF. But he's a very good guy. He has written a bunch of books before, and one of the books is about dark pools. So dark pool is a construct where you can actually do transactions, and because the transactions are happening in a bundle, people from outside only know that you are inside, and they don't know what exactly you are doing as a transaction. That's a traditional finance thing. So best example I'll give you is, have anybody of you heard about Simon, the Renaissance Technologies guy? Okay, all right, one person. So the thing is like Renaissance Technologies is a hedge fund, okay? Apparently they give a return north of 40%, consistently for like 20+ years. I hope you're doing the math, right? Unfortunately for us, you have to be an employee to be able to invest, okay? And the reason that exists and they can survive is because they can have private strategies. And you recognize that we can't have this in a crypto world, right? We all agree we can't have that, right? So if you were to try doing anything like this, then some keywords to remember. One is called compliance. literally, this is a bit of a problem, right? And I used to work for a retail bank. Actually, I managed one bank as a consultant. I worked for 2 banks, Lloyds, HSBC, and AIB. So the thing is, like, KYC is as long as a piece of string, right? What I mean by that is you can actually make anybody's life difficult by just saying that I want to do KYC. Every document you provide, they can just ask for more and more and more. So in general, what happens is they start out with verifying. I have a slide which kind of describes, but essentially the problem is the following, right? KYC, in one sense of speaking, is a state. Everybody understands what a state is, right? So, imagine you have a criteria, you meet the criteria, yes or no. That's a state, a Boolean state. But unfortunately, this is not really that Boolean. That's the problem, right? Given 2 actors, imagine them to be 2 oracles, right? The KYC provider, so I actually have, there's KYC for you, right? So, Swift, right? The equivalent of the rails of any L1 is Swift, right? So Swift actually transfers money between banks. And that's their definition of KYC. And that's what they do. Apparently, don't hold me for this, right? I've never worked for Swift. I'm aware of how Swift works. And this is from my website, right? So please don't quote me and say, Anish, you said this. No. This is what Swift says. And if you don't do KYC when you provide your documentation and they won't allow you to transfer money, not my fault. This is my understanding of things. So this is what they do, right? You submit a bunch of documentation. They have a risk scoring mechanism of some kind. Think of this. Everybody here has a reasonable mathematical maturity, going by the slides that went in. Think of it like a probabilistic graph, right? And they want to actually have some probabilities applied to certain criteria, you're not a terrorist, you're not funding terrorists, all that kind of crap, right? You are not from sanctioned countries. So you can think of a first set of them as being deterministic, okay? So if you are from certain countries, your chances of getting KYC is pretty close to 0, straight up, right? If you are on the sanction list, again, you're not going to get in there. That's deterministic. The rest of it is non-deterministic. What I mean by that is you can toss a coin and you can predict for yourself whether you become compliant that day or not, right? I'm sorry, I'm just being a bit hilarious. So, okay, so this is on a FIDO. This is one of the biggest players in this game. Well, they call it AI-powered. I find it a bit joke, but, whatever it's worth, right? And there are some, Web3 versions of it. So, full disclosure, I use them, right? For my protocol, I use Purify as my KYC provider. So, the reason I wanted to describe is for you as a protocol that actually provides privacy in some sense, you need to have the ability to use somebody third party. Again, I am not going into details of GDPR and the rest of the stuff, okay? That's a separate kettle of fish. So if you are the person who is involved in designing a protocol and you want to have a chat, come find me. I've been going with the struggle for the last 3 years. I can tell you all my notes, right? Share the notes with you. What you do is entirely up to you. Don't hold me responsible, right? I can tell you what is a pain in your wrong side of anatomy, right? So that's a separate problem. Part of the reason you want to use somebody else is because you don't have the data ownership. You're not a data owner. You just consume a service, okay? So key differentiation. If you are the architect of the protocol, you recognize who the data owner is. If you own the data, if you are in Europe, there is this thing called GDPR, and it's a very painful thing. You probably don't want to get into that thing, okay? Right, so the story of anti-money laundering, right? I don't know what to say about it, but in summary, it's the following, right? There are different hoops for people to jump through before they can send some money. And one of them is called anti-money laundering. So, okay, I should describe it slightly better. So what this means is if you are a nation state or if you are a set of nation states, you decide that certain behaviors are not acceptable, okay? It's an arbitrary set of things. So and this is the other thing that you need to recognize. Every nation, okay, I shouldn't call it nation state. So every regulatory regime has a requirement to get a KYC, okay? So I hope that makes sense to you. So if I am KYC'd in region Turkey, it doesn't mean I am KYC'd in the US. I hope that makes sense to you. So if you have a protocol running, if you want to have all the participant of your protocol KYC, you have to have a mechanism in a private sense, making sure A, you have the ability to verify, B, you have the ability to keep the state, and if a party from your pool or your geography is moving across to interact with somebody else, you need to be sure that is acceptable. I hope it makes sense to you. So otherwise you are in trouble. As the builder of the protocol, or not really the builder, the person who's actually running it, you'll have the challenge. Yeah, okay, and then there is one extra bit. So KYC, you could assume at least have a half-life of something. Everybody knows what half-life means, right? So in general, you could assume your KYC is valid for, I would say, a few days, maybe a few months. I don't know what it is, right? Different parts of the world have different views. So this is, again, a very interesting constraint you need to recognize. This is not a state that your user will have for their lifetime. Every time they do have a KYC, they will be issued a KYC. The KYC is valid. Assume that your Boolean has attached to it some timeline. So, you can do a passive one and you can do an active one. Okay, let me explain what this means. So what passive one assumes is it's like certificates, right? Everybody here recognizes certificates, right? You know the certificate revocation list? CRLs? Okay, so something like that. So you can think of the same mechanism that's happening here. You have an entity who actually got KYC. Now the KYC need to be verified, it's still valid or not. You can have a push mechanism or a pull mechanism. Okay? Irrespective of that, at any point in time, as the designer of the protocol, it's your responsibility to actually make sure, at least, okay, this is my understanding. I'm not a lawyer, don't call me for this. This is me putting on an architect hat on describing all my constraints, right? So ask your lawyer before you make this decision, right? So the thing is, you need to know before you allow that party to enter a set of transactions that their KYC is valid, okay? So, and per transaction it could change, right? You can have KYC, still one of your transactions couldn't go through, okay? I'm sure everybody has seen this, right? You want to transfer some money and suddenly it says no. So there's a risk score associated with each transaction that's actually being calculated. So that is the thing that will prevent you from having a successful transaction or not so successful transaction. Okay, all right. So this is more interesting stuff. When I say more, it's more boring. So there's this thing called a travel rule, right? There's like a bunch of countries together. They decided that they have this thing called, I think it's called FATF, right? Don't ask me what that is. But it's a bunch of countries, 36 countries or so, they decided that whenever you move around, you need to actually provide data. And the thing is, sometimes you have to provide data to the corresponding entity before you send any value through. I hope this makes sense to everybody. You see the challenge, right? You recognize how we normally do transactions in any L1s or L2s. We don't actually send anything before we send any value. This is a different paradigm, okay? So this is what I'm saying, we have a bunch of challenges. And to me, some of it is because the way value has been transferred in the society in the past, it was a slow one, okay? And there were mechanisms to roll back. And this is a very important thing I want to mention. Compliance-wise, one of the biggest challenges you are going to face and you will have is this challenge of, if somebody turns up and says, okay, this person's KYC or KYT is not good, bad, whatever it is. What do you do? Normally, if you're in a bank, yes, they will freeze your thing and then it won't go through and they roll it back. Can you imagine that happening? You have to fork the L1 or L2, whatever you are in. That is not up to you. You don't have control over the ecosystem, okay? So I'm sure you're getting the notion of difficulty of actually building a private protocol that allows you to interact with DeFi at the same time having the ability to be compliant. And the price of non-compliance is huge. And I'm sure everybody in the room knows about Tornado Cash, right? Is there anybody who hasn't heard about Tornado Cash? Okay, good. Or no, just to be sure. So literally it keeps me awake. So, okay. Selective disclosure is not really selective disclosure. It's in one sense of speaking, you as a user, as in like a consumer of the protocol, should have this ability to somehow reveal some sets, okay? Some sets. As in like, you have a universal set of all your transactions, and you have a subset of transactions, right? So the subset of transactions could be defined as the set of transactions that you interact with the protocol, or a window of time, or a particular zone where your KYC is valid. And this is very important for everybody. Both you as the builder of the protocol and the user of the protocol as well. The user will have regulatory requirements in wherever the region is to provide proof that they are the people who actually did the transactions. Okay, does that make sense to everybody, or am I talking shit to you? Does that make sense? So the thing is, like, most private protocols, what they do is when you come into the protocol, they get you a derived address, which is not directly linkable to your address, okay? And what this means is, like, once you do this, then you have to reveal the transaction set from that derived address for a setup period or whatever you think it is. And then you need to provide the proof to a third party. The third party could be the regulator, could be a law enforcement agency. You don't know who that is, but you have to comply to actually provide them with that. Okay? Yeah, okay. I literally jumped the gun. So the other problem we have is we have to have identities that is kind of what I would describe as privacy preserving, right? So all that means is the following. So you have an arbitrary identity. An Ethereum address I consider is like an arbitrary identity. And now you actually prove that you as I don't know whether a human or an entity, you have all the bells and whistles that's required for you to live in this world and transfer some money, right? That's what the KYT means. Once that's done, then you have a new identity that you want to make sure, because you are a privacy preserving protocol or confidential protocol, whatever you might call it, right? That you don't reveal the details of the underlying identity, right? So you have to derive one. At the same time, you have to meet all the things I said, okay? Things you need to meet is the ability to actually interact with a random third-party entity which gives you KYC. You have the ability to know that this entity belongs to a particular geography or a zone where it's valid. You have to have the ability to actually make sure that whatever transaction this identity has done, you can reveal at some point in time. All of that are orthogonal to each other. None of them is in the same direction. So you end up with a bunch of trade-offs. Okay, I am not going to talk about any of this stuff. Okay, this is the other bit I think I should mention and you should think about. Okay, you can't have privacy having one person in the room. Like having a snark for one person in the room is as good as nothing. Everybody agrees, right? Is there anybody who has a different opinion on that? No, okay. So we need to have this room, like right now our privacy set is like really small, right? I can count the total number of people is less than 20. So you have 1 in 20 chance of somebody guessing who you are. Okay, so you need to incentivize people. Now, if you are building a compliant protocol and you want to incentivize people, now you as a protocol builder also has this extra problem of making sure all the participants who are in this pool or in the room have valid KYC. I hope you understand the challenge of that, right? So, you're very much constrained. Like, you want to have the maximal set of participants. At the same time, you need them to meet the requirement that A, they are valid for the particular KYC wherever that's relevant, number one. Number two, and their KYC requirement is valid at a point in time. Both of them are in the opposite direction. Getting people to come in and be part of a privacy set is hard enough. Can you imagine actually enforcing two other things in the opposite direction? Right? So this is like, I'm just giving you the challenges that everybody has if you were to build a protocol. So every step of the way is becoming harder because the requirements that are there is derived from a set of norms that existed completely outside of the framework we have, the paradigm we have. So typically what happens in a transfer between two banks, they send a batch file across, okay? And they sync the batch and they both check, asynchronous verification of two databases. That's what you do, right? And then if you have any anomalies, you flag it, and there are humans in the loop to actually look at it, right? We don't have any of those processes. You commit a transaction, job done, end of story. Okay, okay, there are three things you could actually, the tools you have, and that's all I wanted to just say and then keep quiet. So three tools you have is like, you can have ZK, you can have TEs, you can have FHEs. But in summary, the thing is like, none of them really is going to fit you perfectly, right? Each of them gives you some bits of the tooling, right? In an ideal world, if you have FHE plus ZK, you might be able to do lots of things. Given where we are, and you probably would require some MPC, because the thing that happens is like, you would have parties in this ecosystem that you want to have a shared key to actually transfer something. So imagine going back to the question of like compliance or selective reveal or any of those things. You want to have parties reconstruct keys on the fly so they can communicate or verify. So yeah, I was looking at various things and looking at the cost of doing this. And again, look, you live in the real world, right? Doing privacy in the real world comes at a cost. And there are two parts of this cost. One part of the cost is like, you will have to do things like batching. Batching actually doesn't give you instantaneous price. So you lose some. Plus you have a cost of running L1, L2, whatever that is. There's the gas charges or whatever it is. I'm just doing stuff. So this is my last one slider. Effectively, there is no such thing as free lunch anywhere in the ecosystem. And the real challenge is you have a bunch of orthogonal norms that you need to fulfill to be able to build a protocol and do anything. And that, to me, is a non-trivial challenge. Thank you all.